there, because the math behind acceleration is super important, but people got to be bringing those acceleration ideas to the table, or else you're not going to be able to execute on them, regardless of the cost.
So I'm gonna take you there, Mike, and I'm gonna flip this thing around, because when I had the brain fart, I remember when I first said, actually, I want to turn this into a book, and you read the first draft, and you came to me, and you were like, this, no, and then I rejigged it, and you were like, actually, that's pretty good, and then I was like, do you know what would really, really help is you putting examples of how you've accelerated throughout the whole book, and I'm openly happy saying this. Micah is better at practical project scheduling than I am. I am probably better, your opinion, I'm probably better at the mathematics and the theory. So my question there is, the book highlights some of the toughest moments for acceleration. Which of these stories is your favorite? Well, which one actually, still pops into your memory rent-free?
Yeah, well, I appreciate you letting me share some of the stories, and if you go in and read the book, you'll very quickly realize it's called Micah's Milestones and Missteps, because I wanted to capture. There it is. Yeah. I want to capture different scenarios that happen. I mean, it's like, I don't want to write about this in this is, a perfect world where I just snap my fingers and great things, worked out. I think one of them that I highlight in the book, which I think you have a tactic on and it's part of the formula, right? It's information. I think you call it. Is it system information? Yeah.
System information. It covers calendars, constraints, and other things.
Yeah, and it's something that gets highly overlooked, and this is going to seem fairly simple, but I was working on Google data centers, and we're having issues with project and timing, and I went in, and on some of the activities that the general contractor was using, they put on a specific calendar for them, and on others, they had another specific calendar, and I looked at the calendar, and it was actually for a prison build in the same country. And I was like, I don't remember what the name of the prison was, but it was like, blah, 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 prison. And it was like, that is, there's our issue. And it tipped off a bunch of other things, because if you're not paying attention to your calendars, like what else? And then security issues. But I think that one was one of the ones that it's just hilarious to me to this day that I go through, and I was like, why is there a prison calendar on the project? And it also highlights how critical system information is, because it goes back to your model. Schedules are models. They're mathematical models. And that's one of the things why we do constraints and negative lags and, different sorts of relationships that we should and shouldn't do. It's just to make the model behave in a way that we think it should behave. And when you're talking about acceleration, really understanding how the model was built really lets you know about what sort of answer you're getting out of it. And so I think it's something silly about the prison calendar, but it plays such a fundamental role. If your whole schedule is just built on the superintendent named Steve saying everything was 5 or 10 days, you're not going to get a great answer if you start asking it questions on acceleration. And so that was one. I think the other one was, there was one on crashing a schedule. So we crashed a schedule. I was working at Intel, and it was actually a very effective schedule crashing. I'd never really actually been a part of a really, really good schedule crashing session where lots of people come together and you're actually trying to figure out what can be done in parallel, what can be resequenced, what can be eliminated. And it was, everyone was kind of huddled in the room, and we're all bringing ideas to the table. I'm sitting there working side by side with the GC schedulers, making sure that data is getting information in the system, getting it updated, being able to provide the project team answers. People are like on the phone, like, you got to get in here, answer this question now in the nicest way possible. So I'd say two of those definitely is like crashing a schedule, I think has a bad kind of vibe to it now, based on, I think it's possible, and I think it's awesome, and I love that idea. And then I also love just finding a prison schedule in my prison calendar in my schedule. I think those two that are constantly, I just come back to me.
This is why I thought it was so weird. Like, think about it. Why why have none of the governing bodies just published a list of all of the techniques that you can use for acceleration? Like if you want acceleration, go in and check calendars is one of them. Like, why do you have you got? I don't know. By the way, I don't know. Like, why do you think no one's ever done that?
I think that to me there are different angles or different things that organizations cover. And when I think you start crossing over into acceleration, it ends up into more of like a this is what we're doing. This is tactics. Like this is how you go do it. And I think most of the organizations come with the philosophical like why behind it. I think like how you go accelerate a project is very different than this is how a project charter should look. And so, but it's just one of those ones where, I think it's a broad topic and it's hard to write about and it's hard to get the whole thing together. And so it's probably why, most people haven't tackled it because well, what about this? What about that? What about this? And I think it takes a physicist approach to actually create a formula to start kind of containing down this is all the steps that could take.
All right. Well, that's where Brooks give me Brooke and Ben who are on this part of the team have been absolutely incredible, and the only reason the book exists actually is because of Brooke and Ben, because Brooke took all of my writings and all of my notes and even my pencil drawings and turned them all into actual proper diagrams and these kinds of things, and then made it a beautiful hard-backed book. It's amazing. Plus Monica as well on our team. But they've also done something else, which is for everyone who's actually pre-ordered copy, which I was actually quite amazed is quite a lot of people. I never thought, I promised myself at university I'd never do two things, write a book and run a marathon, and now I've done one of them. I might as well start getting my running shoes on. But the other thing they've done is they forced me to record a 13-part video course where I spend 10 minutes per chapter actually going through all of the main stuff in the chapter and explaining it in as simple English as I possibly can, so that if people just want to flick through and then get a really good sense when they're walking their dog or they're driving into work in the morning, they can do. That is completely free to everyone and will be accessible after this session this evening. I don't know exactly when. Brooke will tell me, but it comes back to that philosophy, which is give away all of the secrets totally for free, and then if somebody wants help with implementation because they find it incredibly useful, then maybe you'll call us one day. So that's something that I want to give a round of applause to Brooke for and the team, because I can't do that stuff. That's too much.
Well, tell me a little bit more about these videos so people have an idea what they're getting into. So these are where you're talking about little micro lessons. So you're going to go in and whatever we didn't cover on the call today, maybe some of the stuff we did touch on, you're just going to really go in and show the math behind path crashing.
Well, not the math. I don't show equations, but for example, if I go on page 24, that's every technique you can use to accelerate a project under the 4 areas. Okay. So in the videos, I'll go, right, uncertainty control. The first one is productivity alignment. I'll tell you exactly what this is. And I explain every single one and what it is and how you go about measuring it. But I try and be as simple as possible. So it takes you through the entire book in a summarized way, I guess.
Solid.
Okay,
solid.
So I'm thinking here that we flip it on its head, and we actually open up for anyone in the audience to ask any questions on the Q&A. So I think
yes.
There we go.
We have a few questions in here. So I'll read off the questions and I'll let you guys decide who is going to take it. So we're going to start off with Marcus. Oh, sorry. Marcus has
So,
a surprise dog. Marcus from Rio, from Brazil. Why do we have to accelerate something that was not planned to be optimal? So why don't we just do it right the first time?
yeah.
Oh, okay. So that's a very good question. I'd love to answer from the theory side. Micah, you can answer the practical side. So, and I talk about this. So, a contract is a promise between people. It's not in the laws of nature. There's nothing in the laws of physics that say that the contract that you signed is exactly what should happen based on how electrons fly and based on how the sun shines. So it's a promise between people about what could happen. That promise is incredibly susceptible to biases and to incentives. So if people are massively incentivized to get something over the line, they may understate the risk or understate the cost or understate the time and these kinds of things. What I'd say is that is a different problem than I have a model and now whatever happened there happened. I now need to make this model go faster. And that's just the pure maths of it. So I'd say there's a hard divide between those two, between what I call soft science and hard science. Soft science is sociology, business management, elements of psychology, ecology and things. And hard science is mathematics, physics, chemistry, these kinds of things. And to be honest, physics is just applied mathematics, and a schedule model is an applied mathematic model of how we think the world works. So I'd say that I'd be like they're two separate problems. These things. Micah?
Yeah, that's. Well, I want to just clarify for Marcus. I don't think Greg's intent in writing this book is to say you have to accelerate your project. I'm not sure that's what you meant by your question, but I wanted to clarify that. You know, what he's really trying to do, and I don't mean to speak for Greg, but is just provide you the tools in case you want to do it. And also, many of these tools aren't always necessarily acceleration techniques that come out as pure acceleration, but many of them are efficiency gains, productivity gains, building buffer into your schedule, which may not shift the end date of your project, but could make it less risky. And I mean, to kind of sum up what Greg said, to answer the actual question, it's money. Projects get delivered on time. That earns the client or owner money to get whatever they got finished, started, and rolling. And then for the general contractor, and it costs them, the owner and client, less money if it's delivered on time because it's not late and they're not paying overheads and all that stuff. And then from the general contractor side, typically they earn something for delivering the project on time. And then there's less legal disputes, all that good stuff. So yeah, it really just comes down to dollar bills.
All right. I've got another question from Carter from Intel. He says, Greg, you mentioned in your book emergent forces and a project schedule, likening it to an iron spring. Reducing the uncertainty in that system you mentioned requires only knowledge that it works, not understanding. Is understanding the effects of emergent forces possibly an area you see as the next frontier of sorts, a scheduler, skills, knowledge, experience, or development?
Oh, okay, that's a very good, deep question. Okay, so I'll need to take that apart for everyone. So I talk about in the book how a spring is springy, not because of a law of physics, but because of just statistics. It's weird stats. There are just more states for the atoms where they're curled than they are where they're stretched. So by the second law of thermodynamics, which is around entropy, which essentially is everything tends towards disorder, the spring just naturally wants to curl with vibration. If you freeze a spring and take it to 0 temperature, there is no springiness to it. The thing will just either not move or will snap. So what I'm trying to say with this is a spring, the force of a spring is not a real force of nature. It's what's known as a pseudo force of nature. It comes from statistics. Project management is part of the Faculty of Business Management, which is obviously teaches MBAs and things like that. And business management is part of the soft sciences of university. And soft sciences are fundamentally focused on emergent phenomena, which essentially is correlation versus causation. So if an electron hits an atom, I can imply causation in some way. But if I change the culture of an organization and the performance increases, I can't say here is a causal equation of how that, it's a correlation. This happened and that also correlated to happen. Projects are of that nature. So to answer Carter's question directly, there's a huge amount of research happening at the moment in like some of the top tier universities, so like MIT and Harvard and these kinds of things, around the emergent phenomena of project-based networks. And ultimately what it is learning how to change certain things such that they correlate with greater performance. And it's doing it just to a much more detailed level than we've been able to do in the past, because the level of data being captured today is much, much higher. But practically, there are actually some acceleration techniques that pull on those complex emergent phenomena where you don't actually need to understand the system. And by the way, physicists don't understand gravity. Nobody understands gravity. We don't know what it is. But we've got equations that tell us how it works. So actually it holds true. You don't need to know what something is to know how it generally works. And it's the same thing here. We don't need to know the emergent phenomena of projects. We just need to know stuff that works. And by the way, one of the acceleration techniques is about making things really simple. So stop having 65,000 critical paths or subcritical paths. Just simplify the schedule, make it more linear, and lo and behold, when you do that, it correlates with much less risk in the program. So very, very in-depth and hard question from Carter there. Good one.
I have another question. Do you obey the book in your book, The Sacred Laws of CPM from the 1950s?
The sacred laws of what?
The Sacred Laws of CPM.
Yes, I do, but not directly. I do because I've just assumed that the critical path waterfall methods that we use in things like Primavera P6 and Microsoft Project hold true. What I haven't done is gone into the mathematics of critical path method, because, by the way, the mathematics are wrong, but it's right enough that it makes sense to do. So, yes, the book is not a theoretical brain fart about, oh, wouldn't this be a cool theory to put out there? Again, coming back, tactics and strategies that people can use right away. The book just assumes that nothing, like that the world is the way the world is, and we're all using Primavera and we're all using Microsoft Project, and we all just need to get the job done and we need to accelerate this project by Thursday. Cool. What can I do? So under that guide, yeah, it follows the rule of CPM.
Yeah, I always find it weird when I first started that there was CPM specifications sitting there. Just like, CPM's an algorithm. Why are we writing a specification to it? I think, the approach that I prescribe to now is to broaden that. You're looking at a planning and scheduling approach, and that algorithm plays into it. And part of it, there is a lot more that we can talk about and discuss and really dive into outside of one algorithm.
Yeah, I agree. Coming full circle, it's just strangely the method that everyone agreed represented reality. So everyone just assumes that that's the way it works. Now it doesn't fully represent reality, but okay, who cares? If 20 million people believe it, we'll just go with it.
Awesome. Okay, I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions to answer. So the next question is, what are the key metrics or KPIs which benchmarks this acceleration? Are there anything beyond, is there anything beyond time and cost?
Go on, Micah.
Anything beyond time and cost? Yeah, I mean, well, so there's going to be beyond time and cost, but those are going to be, for example, team morale, safety, quality. That when you get beyond time and cost, those are the things that I write about. A story of mine where we finished a critical project milestone, but no one was really checking the quality of what was being done. And this happened on, countless projects I've worked on, where then you get a punch list, and it's actually not really a punch list. It's just more stuff that needs to be done, and these projects drag on for years and years and years. So I think beyond, the metrics, it's quality, it's safety, and it's team morale. If you start out a project that's 3 months behind schedule and it's permanently behind schedule and bad, like that sucks the morale out of the team, and that can be measured, team survey and all that sort of things. So those are the areas I would check for on that. I mean, when you start looking at acceleration, I think you bring up a great point on metrics and KPIs, that if you are going to accelerate a project, you should probably figure out how you're going to measure the success beforehand. And that can be done in a couple standard ways. You can either be measuring it off of the milestone. You can be measuring it off the cost you decided to spend. You can be measuring more near term off of activity starts and finishes and durations. If you're going the full EVM route, you can look at SPI and CPI and earn and make sure you're staying on that S curve of acceleration. Greg's book has many curves, probably the best curves that you can use to look at on time, late delivery, and really understand what those curves are telling you. So that's what I come up with metrics that are not time and cost related, and then just some of that standard buckets of metrics you could be using. Fundamentally, really, though, is just define your approach before you start to accelerate.
Well, you just said something that made me think that something that isn't in the book. So the book is just it's a cookbook that explains all the types of acceleration and all of the techniques you can use to accelerate. What it doesn't discuss at all is the cost of acceleration and should you accelerate. It's essentially giving people the ability to figure out how, but the should we do it is a separate question. That's really where project experience comes in. I won't name, but there are projects in the world or countries in the world where they have much less requirements around people safety compared to some other countries, and they leverage that to accelerate the project so that they're done faster and cheaper, but at the cost. And it's like, okay, well, should you do that? It's a personal view. Brooke, last one?
Yep. Okay, we have one more question, and this is from Leah Whedon. Are you referring to acceleration in the true sense of increased speed, or are you talking about pushing more throughput through the system?
Ooh, very, very, very good question. So, this is where I've bastardized from physics. So, the very definition of acceleration in physics is the double differential of position over time, which essentially means the rate of change of speed. So if your speed isn't changing, it is not acceleration. If you're driving down the motorway at 100 miles an hour, that's not acceleration, that's just speed. Projects don't work quite like that, because if we have an S-curve and we're doing that and the baseline says this, people would say we're accelerating. If a physicist look at that, and I did have my roommate from university who's a lecturer in astrophysics in London now have a look at it, and he really took umbrance with this. He was like, projects would call that acceleration. He was like, that's not acceleration. There is no change to the second gradient. Rather than stand on ceremony, I just said, look, pulling away from the baseline, we'll call it acceleration. Falling behind the baseline or going slower speed to the baseline, we'll call it deceleration. Let's not stand on ceremony. The goal is to finish stuff faster, whatever stuff that is that we define it. That's how I approach it in the book. It's basically to be as practical as possible. Remember, the book was written not to produce a book. Like mine and Micah's job isn't writing books. The book was produced to eventually be able to train large swathes of AI how to look out for acceleration opportunities. So it really is just the practical techniques that you can use to look at acceleration in projects and how you measure it. Practical being the key term. If it's not implementable, it's pointless, it's worthless. And I said this to someone the other day. If it's not implementable, it's actually worth less than zero because it's cost you money and time to actually make it. Okay.
Amazing.
With that
was
we've come up on time, Brooke.
Yes. All right. You can go ahead and close it out.
All right, well, all I want to say is I want to thank everyone that's been a part of making this. All I want to say for everyone who's on the call is please give us feedback. Please tell us what you think of the book. Up to now, we've only had positive comments back with people saying, one person called it a masterpiece, which I thought was incredibly generous. But generally people have said it's the most interesting thing they've read in the last decade, just because it addresses directly their profession in a completely different way that they're thinking about it. And the only thing I hope from this is that it makes people think a little differently about what they do. And if anybody has any questions or needs any help, Micah and I are here. You just have to reach out to us in some way, either LinkedIn or email, and we'd be happy to help. Beautiful. Okay, Brooke.
All right. Thanks, guys. We'll send out the recording of today's session tomorrow.
Beautiful. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.